Alright, this video is over Unit 6. We're going to talk about sign numbers. What we're talking about here are positive and negative numbers. Okay, so positive and negative numbers, so examples of positive numbers, 5, positive 5, positive 10, 4. Basically any number that's written without a sign in front of it is understood that it's positive. And negative numbers, you can have negative 4, negative 6, negative 23, okay, just negatives. Okay, so negative, the word negative can actually mean a few things. Negative can mean the opposite of, okay, the opposite of. Negative, it can also mean minus. Okay, so what we're going to look at today is a bunch of problems. What can we do with positive and negative numbers? And the first thing, we can express word statements as positive or negative numbers. So the first thing we're going to look at, I'm just going to pull up some problems here. So we've got some problems. This is on page 184 of your book. Page 184 if you want to look at them. And it says express the answer to each of the following problems as a signed number. Okay, these should be very simple. It looks like a hard word problem, but all you're doing is reading. A speed increase of 12 miles per hour is expressed as positive 12 miles per hour, and I would be fine with just 12 miles per hour. Express a speed decrease of 8 miles per hour. Decrease means negative, so that would be negative 8 miles per hour, and that's how you'd write that. And then a wage increase of $25 is expressed as plus 25, express a wage decrease of $18, so negative $18. All right, let's go back to number 2. Traveling 50 kilometers is expressed as negative 50 kilometers. How is west is negative 50 kilometers. How is traveling 75 kilometers east expressed? So if west is negative, east must be positive, so that would just be 75 miles per hour. And if you put a plus in front of it or you don't, it's fine. All right, so that's just the first type of question. All right, so now we need to look at the number line here. So we've got a number line. This is on page 185, and in a number line, 0 is always in, we say it's in the middle. It doesn't always have to be in the middle of the number line you draw, but 0 is like the middle number. It separates the positives from the negatives. 0 is not positive, it's not negative, it's just 0. So the negative numbers are all to the left and the positive numbers are to the right. So the positive direction moves left to right, the negative direction moves the opposite way. Going towards the negatives is the negative direction, towards the positives is the positive direction. Anything on the left is less than anything on the right in a number line. So just some examples. Starting at 0 and counting to the right, 5 represents the number 5 in the positive direction. Starting at 0 and counting to the left, 5 represents negative 5. So we can use the number line down here to actually find some sums, to find 0 to positive 6. We're not really finding sums. It says refer to the number line shown in figure 6.4, give the direction plus or minus and the number of units counted going from the first to the second number. So this is 0 to 6 is positive and 6. Okay, negative 7 to positive 1. So negative 7 to positive 1, count. I moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the positive direction. So that would be positive 8. Okay. It's the number of jumps, it's the number of spaces that you move, okay? So if I move from negative 3 to negative 7. So I start at negative 3 and I move to negative 1, negative 7. So how many jumps was that? That was 4 in the negative direction, so that's negative 4. All right, negative 4 to positive 6. So if I start at negative 4 and I make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 jumps. It took 10 jumps to get to 6 in the positive direction, so that's positive 10. Really, we're adding numbers here. We're adding positives and negatives. So if I start at negative 6, at positive 6, and I go backwards to negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's also 10, but that's in the negative direction, so the answer would be negative 10. All right, so let's move on. What if we have decimals? What if we're dealing with the number line in decimals? Well, we just estimate the decimals. So if I wanted to move from 3 to negative 4.25, I start at 3 and I'm going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and negative 4.25 is right there. So I move negative 7.25. How do I know it's negative? I moved in the negative direction. So if I go from negative 5 to negative 4 1/4, so here's negative 5. Negative 4 1/4 is right there. I didn't even move a full one. I moved 1, 2, 3/4 in the positive direction, so that would be positive 3/4. All right, so now we need to know which is greater. How do I know which is greater if we have positives or negatives? And what I said earlier is anything on the left is less. Anything on the left is less. So if you just put these on a number line, you can kind of tell which is bigger. So I'm going to go with things that are on my number line up here. So positive 3 is right here, and negative 2 is right here. So negative 2 is less, so that means positive 3 is greater. All right, negative 6 and 0. So negative 6 would be down here, 0 would be up here, and so 0 would be greater. All right, negative 12 and negative 4, well, those aren't quite on here, but if I just went backwards, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's negative 12 right there, way over there, and there's negative 4, which is greater. The one on the right is always greater. So negative 4 is greater. The smaller the negative, the greater it is. So now we would want to put some of these in order. So let's just take a look at number 48 here. If I want to put these in order, I look for the negative numbers first. So I have negative 25, negative 7, and negative 10. So the negative numbers are always going to be smaller. Negative 25 is the smallest. Whatever's biggest in the negatives is the smallest. The farther away you are from 0, the smaller you are. So negative 25, then negative 10, then negative 7. And then 0 would go in the middle. And then of the positives, 14, 25, and 7, well, 7 and then 14 and then 25. You should be able to put positive numbers in order. All right, so now we're going to look at operations using sign numbers. And before we do that, we need to talk about absolute value. So absolute value of a number is its distance of that number from the number 0. Okay, the absolute value of a number is indicated by placing the number between a pair of vertical bars like this. So the absolute values of 8 and negative 8 are written as follows, and a lot of times they wouldn't write, they might just write the absolute value of that for positive 8. So the absolute value of 8, positive 8 is 8 because it is 8 units from 0, and the absolute value of negative 8 is 8 because it is 8 units from 0. Units is like distance, and distance is never negative. All right, so if we want to look at some absolute value problems, express each pair of sign numbers as absolute values and subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. So number 1 would be the absolute value of 15, and then the absolute value of negative 10. So absolute value of 15 is 15, the absolute value of negative 10 is 10. It says subtract the smaller from the larger, which means the smaller one goes second. So 15 minus 10 is 5. So let's say I'm going to look at number 3. I'd write the absolute value of negative 6 and the absolute value of 2. The absolute value of negative 6 is 6. The absolute value of 2 is 2. I subtract and I get 4. All right, so now we're going to get rules for adding signed numbers, and these are important. We're going to be adding two or more numbers with the same signs, all positives or all negatives. Add the absolute values of the numbers. These are instructions. Add the absolute values of the numbers. If all the numbers are positive, then the sum is positive, and the positive sign is not needed as in the answer. If all of the numbers are negative, you put a negative in front of the answer. So the sum of a bunch of negative numbers are negative, and the sum of a bunch of positive numbers are positive. All right, so adding a positive number and a negative number. This is on page 188. The procedure for adding a positive number and a negative number. Subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. The answer has the sign of the number having the larger absolute value. So let's look at a couple of examples. Here's a same sign example. Okay, this is going to be a same sign example. So let's say I want to add -6 plus -3. So -6 plus -3. You add the absolute values, so the absolute value of -6 is 6. The absolute value of -3 is 3. You add the absolute values, which is 9, and then since they're both negative, the answer is negative. Different signs, so adding up different signs, I call this one different signs. Okay, so this is adding positives and negatives only. Same sign, add and keep the sign. That's how I remember it. Different signs. Okay, so if they have different signs now, let's say I have -10 plus 5. Subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. So you're still taking the absolute values of the numbers. So the absolute value of -10 is 10. The absolute value of 5 is 5. Subtract them in the order, big minus small. That's all that's saying. So 10 minus 5 is 5. Now I need to decide, is my answer positive or negative? The answer has the sign of the number having the larger absolute value. So that 10 is the larger absolute value. So it was negative, so my answer is negative. And if you go to the number line and wanted to do this problem, you'd start at -10 and then you'd go 5 in the positive direction, and that's where you'd end up. All right, so this will still be the same when we're adding combinations of 2 or more positive numbers. So the procedure for adding combinations of 2 or more positive and negative numbers. So add all the positive numbers together, add all the negative numbers together, and then follow the rules for adding a positive and a negative number. So we've got an answer, a problem here, number 1. So -12 plus 7 plus 3 plus -5 plus 20. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the positives, which is 7 plus 3 plus 20, and that gives me 30. And then I'm going to take the negative numbers, which are -12 plus -5, and that's -17. And then I'm going, since I'm taking 30 plus -17 now, I'm going to find the absolute values, so that's 30 and 17. I subtract those. 30 minus 17 is 13, and then I look at these and say, which is bigger, the 30 or the 17? The 30 is bigger, and it was positive, so my answer is positive. So what about fractions and decimals? They're the same thing. So let's take a look at number 25 here. Number 25, I have a negative and a negative that are going to be added. So I'm going to add the absolute values. -9 1/4, the absolute value is 9 1/4. -3 3/4 has an absolute value of 3 3/4. I'm going to add those together, and then my answer is going to be negative. So 1/4 plus 3/4 is 4/4. 9 plus 3 is 12. 4 over 4 is the same as 1, so my answer is -13. All right, so let's take a look at another one. Let's say I'm going to do number 28 here, and I'm going to do 28 on a separate page. This is -13 1/8 plus 7 13 32nds. So if I'm going to add these, I'm going to take the absolute value, which is 13 1/8 plus 7 13 32nds. I'm going to need to get a common denominator of 32, so this will be 13 and 4 over 32 plus 7 and 13 over 32, and 4 plus 13 is 17 over 32. 13 plus 7 is 20, and then, oh whoops, I did that totally wrong. Sorry, since they have opposite signs, I need to subtract these, not add these. So basically just go back to here and subtract. So I can't subtract, so I've got 13 and 4 over 32 minus 7 and 13 over 32. And I can't subtract, so I have to borrow. That becomes 12, and that becomes 36 over 32. 36 minus 13, let's see, 36, 26, 23 over 32. 12 minus 7 is 5. And then keep the sign of the bigger absolute value, which is this one, so that's negative. All right, we'll get more subtracting, multiplying, and dividing on